Hi, Serena.
Hi.
So nice for you to join. I'm super excited for this talk.
Mm.
The reason why I'm very happy for you to be here is because your book. I like the focus that you have on the communication in relationships and how you investigate it to the fullest. And I think a lot of teams, and especially leaders, can learn a lot from it. And this is what I also do at the Leadership Playground to get people to see different sides on what is possible. So thank you again for being here. And let me dive right in. So let's talk about conscious communication. When I hear the word, how conscious are we in our communication? How conscious are we on how things are perceived and what type of effect our words can have? If we talk about conscious communication, what does that actually mean?
Thank you very much for having me. Conscious communication is awareness of our patterns and our emotions before it gets to a point where it overwhelms us, because the outward expression of what we do, the behaviors we do, are symptoms of what happens inside us first. Everything that we do, whether it's how we speak, how we behave, comes from some form of internal state that is expressed outward. So when we think about conscious in a non woo-woo way, we think about it as gaining awareness about something and giving yourself a choice to make a decision on how to be in a moment without emotions overwhelming you in a moment. So if you think about any kind of situation where you are stressed or where there's some form of conflict, specifically in work, and if you think about relationships there too, it is about giving yourself enough gap and that moment to choose how you respond to something. So giving you enough space to say, instead of shouting this out, possibly I don't actually want to shout. It's an emotion that's triggering a behavior. Once you become aware of that, you give yourself a lot of power in how you engage in situations and bring yourself towards more connecting with people rather than isolating yourself or destroying relationships or ultimately impacting ways in working that doesn't actually benefit your future.
Why did you start it with this project?
I started with this project because I somehow or another was fixated on conflict. So I saw this interest in, maybe we are seeing conflict incorrectly, or conflict is a growth opportunity. So I got super obsessed about that, and I got very into the psychology of it, and then I got into the neuroscience of it. And it still wasn't making a lot of sense for me. So I had a conversation with someone and they started talking to me about physics. And I did physics at school, not well, not well. So we started talking about physics and quantum physics. And I was introduced to a few theories. And I then got a little bit on in a rabbit hole of trying to understand what are certain physics theories, what are physics, what are certain ways of understanding how energies work. And when I thought about it, going, well, in any kind of communication, in any kind of conflict situation, it's energies colliding. And if there's a collision, maybe conflict is being possibly a definition that's not correct. Maybe we're not having conflict every time we think about it. We're having opportunities that we keep missing and seeing as a rupture in relationships or a rupture in our work. But those are the opportunities where if we were aware of what the opportunity was, we could make a decision and go, I don't want to fight with this person, or I don't want to behave this way. I see this situation as, they're wondering or they're feeling insecure about something, so I can help in the situation versus getting my own defensiveness. And when I got into that kind of understanding and that kind of learning, I dove into, well, then awareness is a form of consciousness. And if we opened ourselves up continually to that, then we could dive deeper. So I hate that it all started with physics, because I have told everyone my whole life that I'm bad at math and bad at physics. And I think the biggest spark of my entire life and career and writing has been with physics, which is wild.
It starts with awareness. You really need to be aware of not only of, we're talking about physics and neuroscience, but not only be aware of your patterns, because it's about patterns, right? If we talk about like just have a conversation and just being very emotional because that is your way to survive. It's so important to understand so you can also understand the other person much better.
Yeah.
And yeah, because of our emotions and because of this survival instinct.
Yeah.
So I think it's indeed very important to become more aware.
Creating that level of awareness is that ultimately, exactly as you're saying, is that there has to be, in any way of communications, there has to be a moment of curiosity. And that's kind of the way that I teach it, the way that we kind of focus on it is that the first step really is curiosity. Why do I behave this way? What is happening in the situation? That brings with it awareness, because the moment you become curious, ultimately curious about what is happening, remove an assumption from it, rather leading with, why is this happening? How does this happen? What am I doing? What is this person doing? And then moving towards, okay, you gain awareness because you start really looking at it, making some conclusions from the curiosity, and then becoming more curious on those conclusions. But then ultimately, the only part to really do change is then to be radically accountable to what is discovered in that curiosity process. Because exactly as you're saying, is that to then have a conversation with someone does require versions of vulnerability. So accountability comes with vulnerability, because vulnerability is not an oversharing. I think we've gotten really confused with pop culture that vulnerability means oversharing. When we talk about vulnerability, it's okay, we must now either cry, and that is a definite sign of vulnerability, or we must be sad, or we must be this, or we must be that. So we've kind of taken vulnerability and added definite aspects of what is true about vulnerability, but we've kind of conflated a little bit with a very obvious cue of vulnerability. But really, that accountability of to enter into a conversation with someone to actually say, this is what's going on, this is how I'm experiencing something, and this is the reason why, and knowing the fact that this person has a choice on how they respond to that information, and having that ultimate level of accountability does really open you up again to a new layer of curiosity.
Yeah.
Because once you become super accountable to yourself, your patterns, things that you don't even know are baggage. When you think about communication, it is just learned. It's completely learned behavior. There's this thing linguistically called schemas, and it really is just the way that we speak, the way that we adapt is all linked to our past experiences of a situation.
Absolutely.
If we know that saying sorry ends conflict, we'll learn that sorry will just end any situation that makes us feel uncomfortable. So we'll start automatically doing it without really knowing what does sorry mean. And that's just a broad example, but it is really about how you look at gaining that awareness is how curious are you to understand who you are and not be able and be comfortable to not define that. Be continually curious, then gain that awareness of going, whoa, I do not respond well to these situations. Yeah. And then to say, am I accountable enough to myself to say, I don't like the way that I respond in these situations. The outcomes are not aligned to what I want. Have I enough accountability to then change my own behavior?
I love it.
Really difficult, actually.
Super difficult.
It sounds so simple. That's what I love about communication. In theory, it's so simple because we all do it.
Yeah.
But usually the things that are really simple are really hard.
Creating trust, an environment where you actually feel, hey, I can openly communicate, is quite difficult. If we talk about ingredients, what are the ingredients in a relationship that can give that trust?
I think genuinely in successful relationships, in all relationships where you learn something, which ultimately I suppose is our human lives, is that the ingredients really is how curious can you be and how accountable can you be. It sounds so simple again, but if you think about great relationships, we overcomplicate so much of it because we do want and we rely on all these external things to tell us, okay, this person behaves this way and this is my trauma and this is how I behave and this is how this happens, this is how this happens, this is how, and there are incredible resources that do ultimately give us this information. But information doesn't necessarily lead to becoming more conscious of something. Because if we learn that, okay, our baggage in a relationship means that when my partner tells me I pack the dishwasher, which, by the way, I do not have that skill. It is repacked constantly. I can choose to say, right, this person is critiquing me again. They're telling me that me packing the dishwasher, I think I'm viewing this as going, well, I'm contributing to the house and this is not really what I like to do and I'm not very good at it, but look at me contributing.
Yeah.
But my partner looks at it and sees how inefficient it's been packed and then repacks it. But then we'll say, hey, love, this is not correctly packed. And in my mind, I'm like, why must you keep critiquing me on everything? Can you not just let it go?
Yeah.
In both those, we really are just speaking from one, no accountability on each part. So we don't have accountability on, did I pack the dishwasher incorrectly? What's correct?
Yeah.
Who is correct? What is the agreed upon way to effectively do the dishwasher? And that seems like a long questioning process. But ultimately, if my response was him saying, hey, this is badly packed, I could say, you've spoken to me badly. I don't like the accusation. You are not treating me with respect and kindness and trust. Or what I could also say is going, what actually is the right way? What is wrong about this? What is upsetting you about this? So if I choose first to ask the questions, later I could say, I totally get that this is an incorrect way of doing it because we've now agreed upon what the correct way is. I also would appreciate if you questioned, like told me what you expected from the situation.
Yeah.
In every situation we have that. If you approach things with curiosity and then are willing with the answers to take accountability and not feel that you are attacked or you are this, which you could also objectively, the person could be using attacking words, obviously, but we can choose in situations to remain curious and then accountable to ourselves. What do we want? Do I want to end a relationship because he keeps telling me I pack a dishwasher incorrectly? No. Do I want to have fight every day because I keep packing the dishwasher incorrectly? No. And do I want to pack the dishwasher? No. That is the way forward. Our agreement is, I have clearly not reached our common agreement of packing this dishwasher. So instead of us repeating the same cycle over and over again, I have lacked the accountability of packing a correct dishwasher. Instead of repeating the cycle of something that clearly upsets him, that he can work on his own time, my choice in that situation is going, I would like to pack the dishwasher correctly, but I can do it in these ways. This is a silly example and an incorrect behavior example, silly, but there is a consistent choice in how do we ultimately enable an environment where we trust each other because we're accountable to ourselves and to what the expectations are of the relationship. And those expectations can only be defined if we are continuously curious. And if we continually ask, all right, we have now agreed, I am not in charge of packing the dishwasher. But possibly 2 weeks later, that question comes again, I actually don't like that because now I feel like I'm packing the dishwasher all the time. So is there a continuation of trust in our relationship because we trust the other person to remain curious with us and our little weird behaviors, our emotions, our whatever, and we remain curious with them and their emotions and their evolution and agree that in theory to create a trustworthy relationship with our partners, our friends, our colleagues, is that if we remain completely curious about knowing that they are doing life, us, this version for the first time, and that we are consistently evolving. That's, I think, the entire basis of just trying to continually engage in a relationship.
Stay curious.
Staying very curious and knowing that it's really hard because we want to get to know other people. But removing our assumptions of why someone behaves the way they do is very tricky because ultimately it will cause us to have emotions. Asking someone, why do you feel this is a good way to do something? I'm trying to understand. The answer might upset you more than before you ask the question. You may actually be more comfortable staying with the assumption you had, because that would have been, well, I like you more now because I assumed it was just for something else. Oh, the answer sucks even more. How are you willing to sit with that? And one of the things you said earlier too is how much awareness and how much vulnerability can you have in that moment to sit with someone else's, I suppose, experience of life too, and knowing you're asking a question to understand rather than to judge. Difficult.
I used to have a business partner, and she was never able to deliver in time. So for me, my trust was gone. And I was already thinking, oh my gosh, I have so much to do. And probably I have to do her work because otherwise it's not going to be on time. And to me, that led to, I cannot trust her. Does she even care? But eventually I had that conversation with her and just told her, okay, this is how I feel. And I'm just curious, if we agree upon something, can't you deliver? And then she gave me the answer, I want to do everything perfectly. And if it's not perfect, I cannot send it out. So just by being curious, and maybe I don't understand it, it just gives me insight. And also, okay, she doesn't do it to hurt me, or she doesn't do it on purpose, but we have to figure out how we can do it differently.
You know, people always say, oh, people are not thinking about you and so on. Well, they are, but we underestimate how personally everyone takes everything. We all take everything as a personal attack and say that this person is behaving this way against me, or it's about me. We forget that the world, in theory, does not revolve around ourselves. And the realization of actually knowing and realizing, oh, someone actually didn't do this to me. They actually have their own stuff. It's such an obvious and unnerving way to deal with humans, because understanding and going, oh, that person actually has also got a whole life that I'm not part of. And then thinking about it going, right. But in saying that is that we do have to find the line of knowing that, yes, the world does not revolve around our singular experience, but it does not mean that we must accept behavior that comes towards us in certain ways. And that's the one thing that you've kind of said in the lovely stories that you're sharing is that each time there are moments, there are inflection points where the conversation is where you say, right, what is your line? And to remain curious always, but curiosity will also allow you to realize what is your absolute line of behavior that could come towards you. Because then you give another person the power and the choice to know that you will remain curious about them and understanding and compassionate and kind and all of these values that we want to associate with being human and having relationships. But there also comes a line where that behavior cannot impact you, in the sense of, yes, we take full accountability and ownership of ourselves. We cannot take full accountability and ownership of other people. If we look at that as a situation too, not taking accountability and ownership of another person's behavior, we can say, this is where I'm at right now, and specifically in business situations, this is my line. We have to reach this outcome and do this expectation. This is the behavior in which requires that. I don't want to accept certain behaviors. Even though I remain curious on all of this, I can also have resolution in how I speak and what I accept. Do I want to accept the energy of disrespect or of just what would be considered universally not great behavior? Do you accept that? No, you don't accept that. But it doesn't mean that you have to respond and go there. So you give people a choice. You remain curious. And if there is a continuation and you feel that feeling of saying, nah, I'm pretty aware of my stuff, I can see that in every single situation, even when a person is attacking me, I play a role in how this environment's going. But it doesn't mean taking accountability for their actions. They must deal with the consequences of their actions as you must deal with the consequences of yours. But you have to kind of go into it knowing that there does require radical accountability for yourself.
I think this is a very, very important subject, especially in team collaborations and you're working with different types of people with different stories. what is the tiny thing that you can do to start getting curious? And also, how can you make sure that also your team members understand, oh, this is something that I could also do and implement?
That is a big question, because human beings are ultimately all very unique and all very similar. In your teams, if you do want to build curiosity, you have to manage, specifically if you are in the team, you first have to be curious yourself. You cannot ask others to ask questions of behavior if you ask no questions in return. So the way that you do that, and with any kind of team, if you're managing big teams, small teams, one person, it is really looking at how you run meetings, looking at how you send emails, looking at how you behave. Do you ask a person how things are going, or do you tell them? And then if you tell them because you are, in fact, let's say, a leadership position, so you are telling them you need to do A, B, and C in your job, how do you interact with if they don't meet expectations? If they do meet expectations, if they do this, if they do that, how do you behave towards them? And then are you willing to ask yourself, okay, this person never replies to my emails. This person never does this. No matter how many times I ask this person, no matter how many, okay, then we have to look at, how do you ask?
Yeah.
How does this person respond? Yeah. And this does not mean coddling. I think we have to separate from going that understanding and asking people questions about behaviors and having that kind of curiosity about it does not mean you have to have environments where you're asking people to share personal life stories or overshare or coddle them into behavior of continually saying, it's no problem, or I'm just asking, you have missed 7 deadlines and we've now lost 3 clients, but I'm going to now ask you, how do you feel? How do you want to? You have to find the line between remaining compassionate to know this is a human being and also understanding what your goal ultimately is in a business. Because relationships, if we draw on to how relationships, and as in love, friendship, family, and business relationships, the things that they share is that we're human beings and we're interacting with each other. The difference is that we equate work relationships as transactional. If we only have transactional relationships, we don't automatically bring in the values that we bring in to relationships with people that we love and care about. With family, honesty or transparency, no matter your family dynamics, you want to repair things because you love someone.
Absolutely.
So you're driven by this almost internal value system, whatever that is to you, but you're driven by some form of connection to these people.
Yeah.
Work colleagues, you view them as transactional, and this is not even a fault on any of us. It is transactional. You haven't picked these people. You haven't picked them to spend your whole week with, but you spend your week with. You see frustrations, you have losses, you have failures, but also it is inherently transactional. You go there, you contribute, but we then expect, if we view that as transactional, we also view it as relational, because we get upset when someone sends us a really bad email.
Yeah.
But why would we be upset if it is just transactional? So if we don't want just transactional, as in, I don't want to see you as a human being. I would rather you just email me. I email you back. We don't ask each other how we are. We just keep it as this random, how you would talk to, I don't know, a bot or something. Please do this, do this. Oh, I even said please. I doubt you should do that with a bot. If you want to have great teams, you have to have the minimum basic of viewing them as, these are human beings that I have relationships with. If I want to invest in a relationship, it does not mean we have to love each other or be friends, but it does mean there's a relationship which requires a certain amount of, I would say, actual honesty and investment into saying, this is a human being, I'm a human being, and we have to make this more relational rather than transactional.
Yeah, absolutely.
Difficult.
It is difficult. It is super difficult. Like, human beings we are so difficult.
Yeah.
I like that insight, because indeed, when with family, you do work hard. Also, family you don't choose, of course, but
sure,
there is a relationship and
you're connected.
You're connected. So it is kind of essential to bring more of that love into a company and to create that vulnerability. here's the thing. I often, probably you have the same, but when I do workshops at companies, the first session is always about openness, vulnerability. And in the beginning, that scares people. But after that session, people are so excited just to learn more about that person you see every day walking by, just to have these personal questions. And I believe, and also from what you're sharing here, it is very essential. So based on that, bringing more love into the company, bringing more openness, more vulnerability. What is something that a company could experiment?
There's two things.
Yeah.
Based on vulnerability, I think the reason why we all get really, I want to say a bit weird about vulnerability is because we think we have to go in there and tell people our deepest, darkest thoughts and explain, hello, this is my entire life story, please accept me. If I had to personalize it, I am not a very open person. I would say I'm quite reserved person, which is a bit of a contrast to how I actually carry myself. It's not necessarily in a stereotypical reserved way. But because I'm quite closed off in the sense of I don't really share experiences or any of those type of things, doesn't mean I'm not vulnerable. And what I mean by that is that I could have a very vulnerable, connected, trusting conversation with someone, and they actually do not need to know anything about my life in order for me to be in that moment. So the point of that story is that in companies is that we do not need to know the life experiences so that we can, of every person in our things. And that's where I think a lot of the times companies get it a little bit wrong, because we want people to share their lives with everybody and tell me, what is your background? Where are you from? What did you do? All that we do is that we all judge it, because that's human beings. We talk about okay, you can't be biased, you can't be this. Human beings are inherently biased in some areas. But when you become more conscious about those biases, that is the work, right? But asking people, when you want to create vulnerability with people, I think the clarity should be in, I don't need to know everything that makes you who you are, but how are you in this situation right now? Because you and I are being vulnerable in this situation right now. I'm sharing my thoughts on certain things, and you are sharing your thoughts on certain things. And in doing that, companies can do that. The only thing I genuinely believe that companies have to do differently in any shape or form is people need to have emotional regulation. And that again goes back to curiosity and accountability. If every single person had a course on what is my emotional regulation, if I am sending off an email and telling someone, you're an idiot, you missed this deadline, you did this, or whatever like that, possibly the learning how to wait 5 minutes, take a deep breath, understand that I'm still going to be irritated after 5 minutes with this person because I still think they're an idiot, but possibly the 5 minutes will stop me from emailing them that I think they're an idiot. I think the biggest thing that people can really do when you look at any kind of wellness training, any type of actual training for strategies, is really to understand that every single person's emotions come in, no matter how much you want to ignore that. And in companies, yes, we can pretend like no one has emotions and that we all, but everyone is hiding our emotions in corporate environments, in business environments. We pretend we're not irritated, but we are. And our voices give us away. Our tone give us away, because once you're feeling an emotion, unconsciously it's coming through everything else you do, whether you're tapping your leg, whether you're blinking differently, whether your eyebrow raises and you don't even know it. It would be, how do people engage with their emotions? And that would be it. If people were aware of how they dealt with their emotions and how they behaved from their emotions, you'd probably get a lot of people more interested. And once you're interested, you're curious. And then we start the cycle again.
Hey, like it. We are here to give leaders some tools on how to accomplish that, because I absolutely do believe like emotions are hard to turn off. You will have these emotions either way, But sometimes is to have a practice of, okay, this is our policy. You breathe in, you breathe out. And then you reach out, have a conversation. What are some tools that a leader could share? Maybe there's a 3-step plan to give to somebody. Hey, whenever you feel the anger coming up, this is what you do before you do anything.
I think it's great to have that for yourself, but ultimately, I think if a boss is or someone is giving it to someone, you are telling them what to do with their emotions. And ultimately, the biggest learning of all of our lives is to know that no one, no book, no expert, no nothing can actually tell you how to feel your emotion. We can tell you that you can breathe, but the likelihood is if you don't practice breathing, then you're going to repeat a pattern. So there are loads of ways in which we can regulate. There's loads of things that you can do, but there is not one specific way to do anything. There is also no one way to feel your emotions and to speak. I do not believe in scripts saying, oh, if you want to do this, use this language instead, or do use this language instead. It really is the biggest task for every single team is to how do you encourage other people to be curious about themselves for no other benefit. If you can encourage other people to be curious about who they are and what they do without telling them, okay, if you get overwhelmed, you must behave this way, or you must talk to this person, or you must do this, whatever. Those are great channels to have. And every company should have processes that are based on how do we deal with our emotions? Which avenues of support can there be? Which avenues of support can help you be better at your job, or where can you go? So whether it's a company doctor or whatever your company has in its things, utilizing and making those processes clear for people, very important. The ultimate way that you can get people to really do something about their emotions is how do you encourage people to actually be curious about themselves. It's a age-old saying is that you can take the horse to the water, but the horse has to drink the water. You can't drink the water for the horse. So in all that is the difficulty of why I suppose we've not solved this problem millennia ago, is because ultimately that journey of remaining curious with ourselves and accountable to ourselves is a never-ending loop of just kind of incarnating continually the same things until we learn the lesson and move on to the next. And in teams, the only way to do that is to encourage in whatever personalized way you can without shoving it down other people's throats, is how do you get curiosity by asking people, by doing it for yourself. Because as a leader and as a person as part of the team, if we want someone else to do something, we are, with the best intention, still controlling their behavior. When people feel they are being controlled in any shape or form, we will rebel against that, no matter how good of intention. I think back on how I grew up and my dad was very strict and he had very strict rules. Now I see the intention. I'm like, oh yeah, very good dad, very good dad. But then at the same time, back then, I thought, I have no rights. I'm being controlled. I'm being this. When a person, and the reason why I use my dad is because many of us relate to certain people and things as familiar bonds. If we feel a pattern of I'm being forced or manipulated or influenced or whatever, we just feel attacked. We feel then we need to defend ourselves. Then there's no ability for us to be curious. I suppose the only thing that people, specifically leaders in organizations and people part of team members, the first job really is to have great teams. You have to first be able to be curious with yourself and be curious and accountable to yourself. And once you start to really investigate that, it does become a ripple effect, because we cannot, as team leaders, make great teams if we are not curious and accountable to ourselves. We can't create that, because we also can't have a great relationship if we just expect the other person to change the whole time.
Because it all runs back to being too curious about yourself, about your team. And it's also about keep experimenting, keep doing it, keep being curious. And I think this is how we improve ourselves, but also how we can actually show others to get inspired on how to do it differently for them as well. Because I think it has an effect on on the people around you, on the teams, etc. So I really like these insights. As we've been talking about teams and relationships, what is a standard in communication in teams that we would never accept in a relationship?
Or emails. Or emails. I think if a relationship you get a best Tarina and a thing would not be great. I think the thing that really, the communication styles that do tend to destroy the ability to build and remain curious and create is when we react from these automatic defensive ways to speak. So passive aggressiveness, we don't tend to accept that very well in relationships. We don't respond well to it either. We don't tend to see that much aggression, or rather we don't think we see that much aggression in our relationships or in teams, but all those little microaggressions of, how people communicate, how they send emails, how there are specific ways of having corporate language, for example. So if you think about everything that you want to communicate, there are so many different things online where they say, okay, you want to say something, how do you turn it into corporate language? And that's fun because you can say, I want to tell someone I want to leave at 3:00 today, but make it corporate so that it gets softened. We don't actually like softened language because we think it's dishonest. So in corporates, and I say corporates, but all companies, we either soften our language so that we don't actually know what the person wants. So it's so fluffed that we have no idea what they want. So we build resentment, and that just destroys things because we're continually trying to be like, can you please just tell me what you want? And then we have the other side, which is exceptionally transactional, and we don't like that either. We're like, where is your humanity? So in relationships, we don't like the softened part of it because we will question someone going, what are you actually saying? What do you want from me? Are you angry with me? Do you hate me? Or if they're super aggressive, we wouldn't accept that either. So I think that in both relationships and in teams, for example, is that communication really isn't separate. We don't have different communication styles in our relationships and at work. We just have softened ways of speaking. So we do actually we could accept really bad language. If you think about it, bad communication, if you think about it when you get in a conflict with someone you love, some things that come there are wild. Or if you get into a really bad argument, those things can get bad. It can also get really bad, but you may soften. Instead of being like, I can't talk to you right now and leave and slam a door, you're not really going to do that at work because there are actual consequences. Yes, you might lose a relationship, but the loss in work is livelihood. I'll never find a job again. There's a different security issue versus losing a relationship. So once we equate the different value sets, our communication changes. We ultimately are the same, but we just behave differently because of the consequence of how we behave.
Yeah.
So I think that if we really do look at communication from a relationship point of view, that really is the starting point of how you can understand and ask questions of how you behave at work. If you start to look at your friendships, your family, your partner, which parts of that do you want to start getting curious on? Possibly starting when you're angry is a way, but how are you when you're feeling really happy with someone? When you want to tell them you're a great friend, you're a great this, how do you sit with that emotion? And I don't mean how do you sit with them in it, but can you take someone telling you you're a really good friend, I really value you? How do you respond? What's your communication style? How do you feel? Do you feel uncomfortable with all the goodness? And then when you're in a conflict, how do you respond too? When you start pinning that down, the way you behave at work will become much clearer because the way we at work is just a softened version of who we really are.
Yeah. Super interesting.
Long answer that did not answer your question.
But it gave me a lot of insights. And I think it's really nice just to experiment and just to research that for yourself. I'm very happy that we're doing this. And I'm also happy that I could invite you to the Leadership Playground for the people that are watching, listening, just to experiment further, just to see, okay, what does that mean for me? And what can I learn from that? I believe we have these leadership training, etc. And that is just it's not focused on that person, right? Because we're all different.
Mm.
We have to figure it out ourselves. The same thing you were saying, you
Mm.
need to be curious, you need to learn to understand, and just to see what works for you. Things just click now after this conversation. So thank you so much.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really, really happy that I got to speak to you. I find everything that you do so fascinating and so conscious driven. So thank you so much for having me. Looking forward to the leadership playground.
Yes.